The Central Club.
What's going on, people? Welcome to the Central Club. This episode is brought to you by Ring Aspire Printing, Ape Stride, and the City Arms Pub. I want to say a big thank you to Gary for letting us film in this beautiful location today. And if you haven't already, make sure you hit that like button, subscribe to the club, and hit the bell button to be notified of future content. So today we have got a really important, rather relevant, and quite controversial topic we're going to be talking about. I'm very honoured to have these two guests sat in front of me. It's something that I've been meaning to do for quite some time. And I think now is the right time to do it. There's a lot in the media at the moment as well. And I want to introduce you basically to Mr. Alex Popham and Mr. Lenny Woodard.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. How's things?
Yeah, all right. Apart from the weather, it's
Apart from the weather, yeah.
all good. All good.
We're in Cardiff. It's quite funny, you know, your view right there is looking at the iconic stadium where, you know, obviously is a special stadium for you guys, of course, very relevant. Do you look at that in the same light now with everything you're going through?
I still love rugby and want it to flourish in the future. I want this game to be enjoyed by many all around the world. And without the changes that we want to make the game safer, I don't think the numbers will be there in the future. If they keep their head in the sand on what the problems are, and there are solutions to address a lot of them, it's not going to move forward.
Well, before we dive into that, maybe just for the public who might not know, why are you here today?
So we've both been diagnosed with early onset dementia and probable CTE, which has been made popular by the film Concussion with Will Smith. We believe, and the experts believe, that is as a result of collisions in rugby and those causing concussions, subconcussions. But we've sort of since learned out that every hit is causing some sort of damage. So we need to sort of manage that risk and make that game safer for the future. But that's ultimately the diagnoses that we've unfortunately both had, and both, you know, young men, so to speak. So. And there's younger than us who've been diagnosed as well. So it's a problem. And we want to make a difference and give something back to the game, but also make it a safe game so that game's here in years to come. So that's why I'm here.
Yeah, for me, it's been over 4 years of journey now from realising there was something up, symptoms I was struggling with, going to my local GPs, 9 months of thorough testing, and then having the diagnosis in April 2020, middle of lockdown, over Zoom, getting told that diagnosis. It was obviously a terrible diagnosis to get, but gave me some answers of why things were happening and 5 areas of my brain that were damaged on the scans as a result of playing rugby. We soon realised it wasn't just me. The numbers, the boys I was speaking to, the ex-players I played with and against were struggling in silence as well and wanted to be tested. And that number from when we went public 3 years ago tomorrow, the 9th of December, was 9 players. Now there's over 350. Since 207 names were announced on Friday in court, another 30 players have contacted and want to be tested who are struggling. And that number is growing. On average, 20 players a month are joining the legal case.
Wow, it's certainly a scary thought, isn't it? Like, to think about it. And obviously, if you go back to that film, like you said, with Will Smith, like, yeah, that did shake a few cages, didn't it? And it raised quite a lot of awareness. And I remember saying to my father, I think it was, when I watched that film, he was like, can you imagine the rugby players? You know, these guys got helmets on. Yeah. I remember actually saying that.
Yeah. And helmets don't cause it. They're good for cuts, lacerations, collie ears. That's why they're worn. And if anything, they give you more. They think you're invincible, having that protection that you go in extra hard. The brain still rattles round inside the skull, and don't protect the brain in any way, shape, or form. Unfortunately.
Wow. Well, I've got quite a lot of questions. Some from myself, some from others, which we'll talk about. But maybe first of all, if before we go into this topic, maybe give us a little bit of a backstory with both of you, where you played, what position, and some of your fond memories, maybe.
Well, I started playing rugby at the age of 4 for Newport High School All Boys. Contact was allowed at 4 when I started. I played, which is pretty crazy. And when I got diagnosed, my mum broke down and said, "Why did I?" I said, "Mum, you didn't know sending me to rugby was gonna cause me to have this diagnosis." I played for Newport High School All Boys until I was 17. Newport for 4 years. Leeds Tykes for 4 years, Scarlets for 3, Bree for 3, played for Wales 33 times, 2 World Cups, so 307 and a Grand Slam winner in 08. So, but unfortunately, memories of playing are not really there. Being in stadiums, scores, weather conditions, it just hasn't.
They're not there.
Not there. I know they happen. I got pictures on the wall of games, jerseys, big games, but just no memory of being in.
When you first came in, you said, "I'm going to tell you a story about Popham," and you told the story, but you had no recollection.
I can't remember seeing him on holiday.
So it's.
I've been to places abroad on holiday that I don't know I've been there.
So I started playing when I was 10.
Bit better then.
Yeah, a bit better. They gave me 6 years to grow a little bit. But I would have played competitive matches at 10, but they had a junior school strike. This was back in 1986. So I probably would have played the year older as well. But anyway, they stopped rugby fixtures then. So I didn't actually play until the following year, which was 1987. But then everything went pretty quickly then because you got school, then you went to district schools and then East Wales, etc. Then played right through school, played for county level, stuff like that. And then I played youth rugby, more for social than fun, but then started to develop as a player and physically. I played semi-professional then for Pontypool. Then I turned professional in 1997 with Ebervale. Went on to play with London Welsh, Pontypridd, back to Pontypool, Bridgend, professionally. And then I turned semi-pro then about 2004. I went to regional rugby. I've been Birmingham with Perth Thames Bees, and then back in the Welsh Premier League, which is a similar format to what it is now, semi-professionally. It's a long list. Aberafon, Glamorgan Wanderers, back to Pontypool, Ebervale again, my stag.
You're a bit of a whore.
He just likes kit.
Just like stash, right? As I got wider and bigger, the kit was too small, so I joined a new club. And then later on in the career, I thought I'd give a little bit back. So I was, if anyone was struggling for players, the likes of Fairwater, which we discussed earlier and stuff like that, then I would play, so to speak, on and just do that to help them out. So I finished playing in 2017. Pretty battered then. I had a hip replacement, 2 bicep tendon reattachments and stuff like that. So I had the physical injuries. What I didn't expect was to have the unfortunate diagnosis a year after Alex in 2021 when I was 45 of what we discussed earlier.
I think what's interesting with the two of you is you've both played at a very high level, but you've got like the difference as well. So you've got like you said, you played semi-pro, you played club level, and you've played at the highest of heights as well. Like, so it's, there's no prejudice really there with this illness.
No, I think for anybody who's played rugby, they would be at risk. It's just how long they play for, the dosage of hits to the head over their career, over the week, over the season, and as I said, over that person's career. And the longer you've played, the more exposure you've had, the more at risk you are. Yeah. And for us, the changes with Head for Change and Progressive Rugby, the lobby group I set up, everybody is passionate about making the game survive and educating people in this area. We want the game to survive. The majority of the changes we want to make are Monday to Friday, so they won't really affect the game. There's a couple of areas of the game on Saturday that you could look at to make it safer. But the majority we want is Monday to Friday and how the players are looked after, and that's current players. And if we don't get it right now, mums and dads are not going to send their kids to rugby practice on the numbers we need to make this great game survive.
Because you would have when did you turn professional? What?
98, I think.
98.
Yeah,
so
98 when you
I was
born.
97, 90. So this was still new in the age of professional rugby. So what tended to happen in those days is that, and I played for Valley's professional club, so they were very intent on making sure that we were a force to be reckoned with, which meant physical, hard training, hard men playing it. And you would have to obviously replicate that intensity in training, so you were able to perform in a match.
But we went from being amateur training Tuesday, Thursday nights, play Saturday, to training every day of the week.
Well, rugby's a young profession, isn't it?
Yeah, but having you in the ground in the stadium 9 to 5. And the mentality was, we're going to train you 9 to 5. You're going to do 3-hour contact sessions 3 days a week. You're going to train harder than you play. So the game was easy. The last man the 15 that were standing on a Thursday would play. It was like the Wild West. There was no referees. There was no medics on the training ground. You had a kit bag with water. You strap yourself up. You'd have some sniffing salts if you were concussed. And you just crack on. And that was the mentality it was. It was insane.
Wow.
It was hard. It was physically hard. But yeah, it felt like because they turned professional and they were now paying you a wage, which wasn't great in those days. I think my first contract was 15 grand a year. There's a lot of misconception of people. You were paid, loads of money. I was equivalent of a teacher, which I was qualified to do, but I decided to play rugby because that was what was offered to me. But the intensity and the duration of those training sessions, like you say, you sometimes do 3 times a day with certain clubs, 7 o'clock in the morning gym, contact session, skill session. So it was physically demanding, but they wanted to get their pound of flesh because they were paying you. And and many people would say rightly so. They've learned a lot now. Sometimes rest is as good as the actual training itself. But we certainly, in the earlier days, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was hard physical work. You were always aching as a professional.
You lived on painkillers. Yeah. You take your painkillers in the morning with your vitamins, and that was during my career. My whole career, I have that, and in retirement would suffer with headaches. I'd take them most afternoons in retirement, but that's what most boys, apart from the first game of the season, that was the only game, or pre-season, that was the only game of the season you didn't have an ache or you didn't have your thumbs strapped up. But the more the games went on in the season, the more you were strapping up.
And there was practice, and this probably happened with you guys, but I remember playing against Newport, couldn't raise my arm before the game, have an injection to my shoulder, playing the game, half hour later, then not being able to move my arm until the following Wednesday, and doing the same thing for weeks at a time. And I had the same with ankle injuries as well. So not just the head injuries. That was the mentality then.
You knew your body would be in bits in retirement. You know, going into your old club and seeing guys with bad knees, bad backs, shoulders. But nobody told us that our brains would be damaged in retirement.
And this is obviously one of the points I want to talk about. Like, obviously, people would say you knew, the nature of the game. Like, the biggest thing I enjoy about combat sport is the rustle and tussle. And if you knew about. If you did, let's say the brain injuries didn't exist, would you be happy with everything else?
Yeah, I could strip naked now. I've got a scar there, a big huge scar down there. Fine, hip replacement, 2 bicep tendon reattachments, dislocated fingers were at the strap for ages, operation, mallet fingers, stuff like that. I snapped tendons in my finger. Not a problem with that. I knew it was a physical game, and that's part and parcel of the game. And get up every morning, ache, shoulders ache, can't sleep at night, never get a complete sleep at night because my shoulders are in bits. But fine, I accept that, completely accept that, because that's common sense. That it's a physical game. You run into people. You saw people during your career with knee injuries, shoulder injuries, et cetera, et cetera. So you knew what to expect there. But what you didn't see or hear about, which potentially we should have been told about, was what potentially could happen with our brain. And when I see in the list that came out on Friday with the age of those players, in their 30s, having dementia, because we're all familiar with dementia because most of us have had parents, grandparents, who've suffered it. But they're in their 70s and their 80s and their 90s, not in their 30s, well, some cases 20s, 30s, and 40s, and that's that's really what we didn't know, and nobody knew, and
or players didn't know, and the conversations we're having now in rugby were happening in boxing 100 years ago. This knowledge has been around for a long time. In 1997, rugby realised there was a problem with concussion and brought in the 3-week stand down for players who were concussed. But then that 3-week, you were told, "Oh, don't say you were concussed. Say it was your shoulder. Say it was your knees, because otherwise you're going to miss 3 weeks." It just wasn't taken seriously. In video analysis sessions, if somebody was KO'd and walking like Bambi, they would rewind that back and everyone would have a good laugh. It just wasn't taken seriously whatsoever.
That's and that is something that we do now, isn't it? You know, knockout videos on YouTube. We love that. I think that's just the human nature side of us. But I think as professional, there has to be some sort of responsibility there, doesn't there?
Well, it's a duty of care as an employer to look after their staff, and it just wasn't there. And I still think current players aren't. They still believe it's okay to, after being KO'd, to return to play 7 days later. In rugby, that is allowed, with the loopholes that are allowed. In boxing, the same injury, you're not allowed to fight for 3 months. Wow. And in rugby, you can come back 7 days later. It's insane.
Yeah.
It really is. It's and they reduced that down to, with no sort of medical evidence to do that, in 2010, 2011. So down
from 3 weeks down to 6 steps that fit into 6 days.
Yeah, which is just if you speak to brain experts and not the general public, there's no way the brain's recovering within 6 days of taking a serious hit. So
yeah, definitely.
And I've spoken to parents who've lost children where they've been put back on the pitch, had a second impact, and unfortunately died. This is serious. This happens. In 1996, an Australian player playing for Oxford University against Saracens had a traumatic brain injury in a game and died. In his autopsy, the coroner said it wasn't just the scar of that injury on his brain. There was multiple scars. Wow. And then in 97, they found CTE in his brain. 97. That's almost 30 years ago. And were advised to look at the safety of rugby.
No one ever did.
They start in rugby league, and they seem to be a little bit more forward thinking, because I remember playing for Wales in rugby league and having to do cognitive tests. So they had a baseline measure, and then if you were concussed, they would test you after to see what the level of injury potentially was. But then players got wise to that, clubs got wise to that, and they would tweak it or cheat or make their baseline scores worse than they would normally be, so they could. So they would have players back out on the pitch. So. Yeah, and there's responsibility there.
Well, the buck has to stop somewhere, doesn't it?
You've got player responsibility, you've got coach responsibility, you've got club responsibility. But there was pressure, that might have been self-pressure, but people wanted to be on the field to play rugby. And there was also financial pressures within that. If you were professional, appearance fees, win bonuses, that people had young families and mortgages to pay. So there's all sorts of.
It needed to be, in my eyes, needed to be taken out of the players' hands. Players are gladiators. They don't want to lose their spot. They're fighting for the next contract. It needs to come from above.
We interviewed Tom Lockyer last week, and he collapsed at Wembley at the playoffs. Luton centre back, Cardiff boy, and perfect example. He collapses. He gets back up. Come on, Locks, you're off. No, I'm fine. Yeah. I want to play. Yeah. You want to play, don't you?
Yeah,
it don't matter what the hit is.
You don't want to let your teammates down.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
They had one instance in France. We played down in France, and I got the 6 carried off the line out. So he had roughly a 20-metre run at me, and that was the first line of defence attack. They really ended up concussed. Physio came on, and I couldn't, gone for a bit, and they didn't have a sub, so he goes, you're all right to stay on. And then obviously you say yes. Anyway, I stayed on. I couldn't see out my right eye. I was going like that all the game. Subsequently had a nightmare. And then they played Leicester at Pontypridd in the following week. I got dropped for that game. They beat them at home. And then I got put in for the following week. Then we played them away, and we just lost. But ultimately, lost place, lost the prestige of potentially beating Leicester, which was a massive thing for Valley's club in those days. But stayed on the night the evening of the game I stayed on. Was sick straight after the game. Was sick all night. Didn't know where I was, anything like that. And then I was rough for about 4 or 5 days after that. So,
and what Lenny just said then is there's mirror stories throughout the 200, 300 players that are involved. Chris Jones, English second row at 14, 15 stone, 30 recorded concussions. The evidence shows if you have 3 concussions in your career or in a season, you should retire. He's had 30 recorded.
In one season?
No, not in one season, over his career.
Over his career.
30,
he's probably had 3 in a season then.
Yeah. And it's just, doctors who are involved in the game, who sign when they become a doctor to at first do no harm. Some aren't.
Not happening.
No.
And if you look at the lower levels we talked about earlier, it's all right. Alex played the top level for the vast majority of his career, if not all of his career. I had the luxury to work down for the levels. You haven't got doctors at every single game.
No.
So I played over in Rumney. This was in 2010, so a semi-professional.
Great rugby club.
Rugby club. Took one for the second row. Broke my nose. Was concussed. A guy who's done a first aid course came on, obviously looking to look after me. He goes, I think you should come off. There's a photo on my Facebook with it. It's out there. But as a player, no, I'll stay on. That decision, if he was a doctor, might have taken it out of his hands. But at the lower levels, you haven't got the medical expertise.
Someone's buying you another pint at the end of the game to stay on.
And you've got different pressures and responsibilities there. So you want to stay on and play. I scored my 150th league try in that game. Can't remember it. But the physio was suggesting I might come off. I was saying, no, should that have been overruled? Could that have been overruled? We were near the top of the league, so there's pressures then to win the game. And if I was Division 1 then, which was the equivalent of the Championship now. So it's, it was the first year coming back down from the Premiership. So they wanted their best players on the pitch as well. So there's that sort of pressure. You need to win the game. It was a close, I think we won 15-11, but it was a close game as well. So there's all sorts of pressures on to keeping that player on the field. And I'd moved into coaching after playing, worked my ways up from my levels up to level 3. And I would make different decisions now to what I probably would have done then. If I had a cup final and it was 16-15 and my outside half tackled someone and got concussed, but he's the only place kicker I've got in there, then I might have that time been encouraging or secretly wanting him to stay on the pitch and not had his best interest at heart. Completely different now.
Len, you said about, there's a lot of times you don't remember playing. Is there any hits though that you look back at and think, I think this could be a part to play?
I think what I know now, every hit is, I can't genuinely, people say, can you remember that hit against so-and-so, this hit? I've got no recollection of, which is nuts. And unfortunately they're not there. The 2 big KOs that I know happened. One, I met Mandela before the game playing for Wales against South Africa. Took a hip to my temple. Knocked out cold. Had a fit. Swallowed my tongue. Wow. Kerry Sweeney. I only know this because of reading reports and watching the video back. And woke up in hospital. The other one, I had my 2 front teeth knocked out. Woke up in the changing room. Played 5 days later. Memories of big hits, and I know I was a physical player. That was what I was good at. And each tackle that somebody asked me, do you remember that one, that big one again? It's not there.
Yeah.
But the other thing as well that people don't realise, but I've done a talk for the Children's Alliance, so I did some research on this, but only 10% of concussions result in unconsciousness. So where you ask the question, can you remember the big hits? There's also a lot of big hits that you have, but you weren't knocked out.
You wouldn't even recognise,
but would have caused damage. So
you would see stars all the time. Do you know what I mean? Hitting pads in the warm up before a game, hitting contact sessions during the week. You've always had a fuzz about you walking around, and that was just the norm of how your brain was.
Was you ever aware of concussion during those times?
You were aware of concussions, are you? But you weren't aware what we now
the consequences.
You thought a concussion, a traumatic brain injury, where you were knocked out cold, and you got to hospital. That was if you come round on the pitch, that was.
Was it ever a worry for your future well-being?
No, they didn't realise what he would do in the future. No one told us that. So I slightly probably different experience to Alex, but certainly in summer training when I was playing with the professional clubs I did, I think they used to relish having a winger. So they'd have a 5-yard channel with a big guy on a pad, and there was a couple of Dale McIntosh and Will James and Gareth Rowland spring to mind upon the pre, but they were big, huge men. And then now, so normally you would step them and go around them or use your pace to go around them. Then they've got this good, like, yes, I could get my own back here. So we've got a 5-meter channel.
It was like the Gladiators.
With a tackle
channel on the
and then these men virtually filled the channel anyway, and you've got to try and get it. So they wanted to be seen as the enforcers and stuff like that. So they did you, and I'd be like, after
it. Would you trade your careers, your earnings, your status for your health?
100%.
From what you know now?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
I just wish what was known was passed on to us. So when you did see stars that you sat out of the session, give yourself the time for your brain to recover, but it never recovered.
So you would trade everything for your health?
And you've got a real illustrious career as well, so that's big words coming from.
So you'd be a barber in Pill
with no brain damage.
Yeah.
See, the question that you asked has got wider repercussions for my children, their children in the future, and my family now. Rugby was an option for me, so I did my degree in UIC as it was there, qualified teacher, but I had top grades right the way through school, A-levels, A's right the way through. So it was an option for me. When I finished my degree, I had 4 or 5 clubs to turn professional, Newport being one of them, Abervale and Effley, Bridgend, and there was one other I can't think of now. But it was an option for me to get money, so it wasn't my only option. Whereas I've had a lot of vitriol from players who rugby gave them everything. It was just an option for me. So they approached me, I didn't approach them. So in those days, you didn't have the academies and everything. So if they thought you were good enough a player, they approached you. So it sort of enticed you to go and play for them. So mine was slightly different, but I didn't earn the big money that a lot of people think you did, although it was a career for 6 or 7 years. But I played for enjoyment for a lot of it, but would quite easily trade that, because I played hockey at international level up until I was 18.
I can have a bit of a part to play, sure.
Yeah, well, I didn't get it in the head with it, but there was not ice hockey, field hockey. So,
I was going to say.
Yeah. So, but preferred that as a game. But enjoyed the social side of youth rugby, certainly, and then sort of went to play, because in those days you played youth rugby, you had to play for the first team for a year, and then tried my luck with Pontypool. I'll just go to Pontypool because I was a Pontypool boy. They were huge back in those. David Bishop would come back to coach, and I thought I'll try my luck, and then it took off from there. Within a year I was professional, so it was not a planned career move to be a rugby player, but then you obviously ride the crest for a
No, but like if like you are known as a rugby player, and like the status comes with that, like
in Wales,
and there's you're very successful as well, like, but there's people out there. Do you think there's a lot of people out there who would not exchange that career?
Yeah. I'm sure. Well, they say they wouldn't, but they say from a perspective, them being diagnosed with a traumatic brain injury, they're not given life expectancy. 10 to 15 years. They're not going to be a kid in a care home in 8 years. But I think in the UK, you're not in a care home before the age of 55, supposedly. Care home costs roughly £1,500 a week. So if you're in there from the age of 60. And you live to X amount of age, you've got times that by a number of years. There's a huge financial pressure and burden on that, but not on you as the person who's got the issue, because someone's got to pay for it. So you've got property, all the hard work you've put into accumulating wealth, so to speak, can be gone like that to pay for that care. Now, is that fair if it is proven to be?
And also, is it fair on the NHS to also look after you and your psychologist to be tested and all those things? It should be down to the sport to...
I agree there, definitely. Well, talking about the dementia again, like we said, we know about dementia. How do you determine that this is a rugby related issue rather than just an issue? Like, what's the process?
Okay, so I'll give you my experience and what I've learned, because I've obviously looked into this quite a bit since. But I was struggling with memory issues and certain symptoms, and spoke to Alex subsequently, and he told me his story. I was saying, that's me. That's the same as me. And I've had the same effect when other people approach me, and we've all got similarities. The testing is extensive, so it's not. There's I see a lot of media comments on Wales Online and stuff of people jumping on the gravy train. You just don't say I've got dementia and that's it. You have to go through extensive neurological, psychological testing, brain scans. But you can't be diagnosed with CTE, which is why we say it's probable, until you've died. So you have to do the sections of the brain. Mm-hmm. And what the difference between once they've done that is the what they call the accumulation of different tau proteins, which basically means there's damage to the brain. It releases the protein, where that accumulation lies within the brain. Now, in Alzheimer's, it's a specific part. In CT, it's in a specific part, whereas Alzheimer's is all over the brain. So you can pull it in the certain area when you look at the brain scans and see, and that's where the diagnoses lie.
Yeah.
And the majority of the players who've been diagnosed, their damage is in exactly the same area.
So if I said all the players who played in your generation, they're not all entitled to this ticket, let's say, to put in a claim.
No, they have to be tested.
Yeah.
There's most probably a dozen players who were worried, who were showing certain symptoms, who got tested and aren't severe enough to have a diagnosis, of being told to come back in 12 to 18 months to be retested. So not anybody can join the claim just because they feel like it.
Yeah.
They have to have hard black and white evidence of damage to be part of this group.
Yeah, and surely you wouldn't want to have the fucking diagnosis anyway.
Definitely not.
What is it like? Some of the public scrutiny you've gone through, and does any?
We've been public, so I personally have taken a lot, but I try and take my time to engage with them, to try and educate them on because they're speaking from a point of view where they don't know the information that we know. So I try and take on Facebook and stuff like that, take my time to patiently answer without being abusive to it. But it's hard sometimes. And Alex has been in the public eye a bit because he was a year before me, and he was one of the original ones who got diagnosed. But I didn't expect it. So and this is me as a person. If one of my teammates got diagnosed with it and we thought it's because of rugby, I would support them 100%. But and what's been disappointing for me is the backlash from some former teammates, and general public who don't know the information we know, who are quite abusive about it, about certain individuals and stuff like that. On the other hand, I've had people who've been struggling and present. I'm sure you've had this as well. I've had their families message me after testing their diagnoses. Thank you so much. We knew something was wrong, but we didn't know what it was. So as Alex said, there's a silver lining on the cloud in the fact that people have now got answers to why they're not the same person as they were 10 years ago. And I've had quite a few messages of thanks from the people who've been tested and subsequently got the devastating news, but they've got answers and they can plan for the future once they've got those answers. So it's a double-edged sword.
Because you wouldn't be able to go through this testing through the NHS. The scans that they use are only in academic settings. So the DTI, diffusion tensor imaging, that picks up the damage or shows the damage, is so thorough, can only be, you can only have one of those through this legal route. I think the testing to get a player diagnosed is between £16,000 and £18,000.
Wow.
That the legal firm and the insurers pay for. So if you are having symptoms, the NHS can't give you the answers that.
I see.
You've got to. The only way is to join the legal route.
Who is your claim against then?
World Rugby, WRU, RFU, and I played in France as well. So the French Federation. So
mine's the same, but I've got the Rugby Football League as well. So,
is that rugby league then? Yeah.
So I played that one.
So are these organisations, are they kind of shaking in their boots with this at the moment? Maybe are they worried?
The union side really backward appeared to be real. Not denial, which is what happened with the NFL and what happened with ice hockey previously. The Rugby League, in fairness to them, they want to get solutions and answers and make the game safe to make sure there's a game in the future. So they've been a lot more, how can I describe it? They've been a lot more engaging of approaching the subject. And as I said, with Rugby League, I was tested in 2003, 2004 and I didn't have any of that in Rugby Union at those stages. So they seem to be more switched on and accepting that there is a damage caused from playing rugby.
Because the changes we want to make the sport safer, if they make those changes today, it opens a can of worms up for them legally. So what was done in the past, so they're not making the changes that need to be made to protect the current players.
That's what's worrying, isn't it? Because it's not just you might get payouts or get some sort of justice financially, but if they're going to continue to deny it, there's never going to be a change.
We will, if it goes to court, for me, the experts, the lawyers will take care of this, and they will fight that battle. For me, it's about protecting the current players and the future generations, because if they don't do it as soon as possible, the boys and the females who are playing now are going to be in the same position in 15, 20 years. So at the moment,
then, it is just at the moment for you guys a matter of just putting a claim in. There is no solution from their behalf at the moment. There's no solution.
It's too early in the court case. At the moment, it's a game of chess that's going on between the lawyers, and let them get on with it. But without those changes that need to be made, we're going to be in the same position.
And what are these changes, would you say?
For me, the biggest one, 90%, 80% of my damage was done in training. So in the NFL 14 years ago, they put in mandatory amounts of contact training. That's policed. If a team does more than their 14, they get fined. So we need to, and at the moment, there's guidelines of 15 minutes. That needs to be made mandatory. When there is a traumatic brain injury, a concussion, you can come back in 7 days through the loopholes in the protocols. It's all player-led. It's on how they're feeling. And as we said earlier, players are gladiators and they want to play. So that needs to be increased to 28 days before they're allowed to play again. The third thing is MOTs for players. So annual tests, including that is a brain scan that picks up any damage from the previous season. And we would also like that rolled out in retirement, because when you retire from rugby, at the moment, it's just all the best, lads, and off you go. I think every 5 years you should go through a medical after being a professional player to have your full body looked at and looked after in retirement.
Because there's, talking post-retirement, there's, and I'll share this with you guys as well, but I struggled when I finished rugby, and that culminated in a suicide attempt back in 2015. And there's a lot of things that go alongside CT, which they're associated with that addiction, which I know you're a big champion of, suicide attempts. There's lots of other things as well in there. So it's a complex condition, but there's a lot of people. One who was an active claimant of the case who took his own life.
Wow,
which is devastating. And obviously, when you look at the again, to couple that with the age of these players being diagnosed with dementia, so this is day-to-day struggles for people.
What's the youngest of this?
24, I think he was 22 when he retired. Yeah.
That's it. My oldest daughter's 23 now. She's still a child in my eyes. I'd be devastated, and rightly so, if that was the case with her.
Have you had any low moments in your life with this?
I've never really had, thankfully, the being depressed or, but yeah, every day's not easy. I have been away for experimental treatment and it's been very positive. We're trying to bring it to the UK at the moment to do the clinical trials. Some of the boys are on a drug trial as well.
What's that for? Is that for the
the damage? So at the moment, there's hope. Nothing's been clinically or scientifically proven at the moment, but it's better than when I had my diagnosis. There is no treatment, there is no cure. So having hope with these potential treatments is a positive. But the boys, again, different day to day from being depressed. I'm one of the guys I played with in Leeds tried to commit suicide 3 times. He's lost everything. He's living in a council house. He can't afford Wi-Fi. His wife doesn't share a bed because he has between 6 and 10 seizures a week, fits where he lashes out. People are in really bad ways. And
we don't see this, do we?
Did you play with Paul Jones at Leeds in the Scar? And
Newport.
Newport. Okay, so Paul Jones unfortunately took his own life. I was good friends with Paul Stretch, as he was commonly known in rugby circles. A big, huge guy. Took his own life about 2 years ago.
And the number of suicides worldwide of who have played contact sports in AFL, Rugby League, there's hundreds of people.
It's the opening of the film Concussion, isn't it, with the American foot with Mike Webster? Which it sort of grabs your attention straight away. But it's I
hadn't watched that or heard of that film
really
up until I got diagnosed. And the worst thing I did, you Google CTE. Concussion came up. The film. I watched it with my 2 elder daughters and my wife.
How did that make you feel?
I was like, what the hell have I just done? Make my kids sit through that and watch it. Yeah, it's just but it's reality of what some people are going through.
Of course.
So my partner's a twin brother. That I was always asking because they've seen it. Is he ever violent? Which I'm not. But the opening of the film is Mike Webster. And there's domestic violence. There's addiction. You know.
Well, I'm sure.
I've had rages. I've ripped the banister off. I've put the holes through walls. I've never been physically violent with anybody with this, but
Mel talks about that on swimming. The struggles with it. So I'm not the man I was 10 years ago. I've got much shorter fuse. When I was playing rugby, I'm not sure if it was the outlet of training and stuff, but from the age of say in the last 10 years, I'm a lot more explosive than I certainly was.
Snappy.
Yeah, snappy then. But
you find that more snappy.
And I spoke to a player who's displaying all the symptoms but doesn't want to get tested or play professional with extensively. And he goes, I'm like Victor Meldrew. He goes, I'm so miserable and snappy. Now I'm in my 40s than I was.
Have you had any players who you played with who you've kind of split the divide on it, or you might have fallen out with because of this?
Not many to my face. I think there's WhatsApp groups where people are talking about. I don't read any of the comments on any of the articles. I know I can look in the mirror. I'm doing this for the right reasons. I'm being honest with myself. I'm being honest with what I'm talking about on what was known and didn't get passed down to us. And the big problem here that every contact is causing a little bit of damage.
You know, there's groups of lads out there who you played with probably say, fuck him.
But they're not educated on this issue, on what was known and how we were looked after.
Yeah.
And treated like pieces of meat, really.
Yeah.
When we were playing. And that's what we want to change.
And that's what it is for me on face value. I think one of the things that come to my mind is that, like, someone who's a fan of combat sports, someone who played combat sports, combat sports, contact sports, and combat. I think it is that gladiator element to it that we all love, and I'm sure that was what got you into sports as well.
Loved it,
and that was probably one of the first questions before speaking to you. I wanted to ask you is, do you have any sort of guilt that maybe you're watering that down by bringing this up?
But no, for me, the game on the Saturday is a contact game. There's going to be traumatic brain injury in that game. It's about managing what's around that. So during the week, how much dosage they have. Yeah. And looking at the length of the season. Like South Africa and Argentina at the moment play 12 months a year. They don't have a rest, which is insane. So we're looking after the welfare of these players now and into the future. And without this legal case and putting the pressure on the governing bodies, there wouldn't be change that is needed.
Go on.
So this is a dichotomy of where what people want. So you've got supporters who want to see their clubs and countries playing as often as they can. There's clubs who need that financial revenue from home games. So if they reduce it to, for argument's sake, 5 teams, they'd only have 10 teams. They don't have 5 home games a year. That's not going to be financially viable for them. So there's all sorts of financial constraints and pressures on it. Going back to what I wanted to do from going public with this. There's a couple of things, and people everyone assumes that people want to jump on and because there's money involved. But for me, that's just a small part of it. But not for me. So my family don't have to. My children don't lose out on what I've worked hard for. So I just make sure all my care is covered. But we want to make the game safer. Alex's set up head for change is trying to make the game safer. I want this game to be there 50 years time, and I want there to be big physical hits, whether that's tackling or strong carries within the game, but in a safer manner as possible. So they looked at, which was very controversial last year, but looking at lowering the tackle height in the semi-professional game, which has caused uproar. And there's the balance then of where we've watched World Cup games with seemingly minor collisions, but there's been an accidental head knock where people have got different views of whether that should be a red card, yellow card, or not.
And what would you say that is?
On a personal level, I'd like to see some level of intent, but then how do you measure intent? There's certain things where I think a game might have suffered where they've both gone up for a ball, there's been accidental head, and they've tried to decide who that.
Yeah.
So I want to see, they appear to be the extreme end of it at the moment, but where do you start as a starting point? We need to make it safer. But the game when we played, people swinging arm to the head, didn't get picked up by the VARs and all that was part. But
if they was to make it safer from a head collision like that, rather than a red for one or two of the others, maybe just a straight swap.
Well, look at Tom Curry's for sending off in the. I feel this is a personal thing that there's not much he could have done to avoided that, and he ends up with a red card. And I'm not sure whether that might have been a yellow or a different sort of type of sanction, so they review it afterwards and then look at it as a whole. But they lost England. They won the game, but they lost a player then right in the early minutes of the game. He can't play because he's got match bans after that, and so. But then,
for me, he should have been in control of. He was the defending player. He should have been in control of his jump and
split second stuff. It's difficult, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm speaking
and
as
again,
a
that's an
spectator
aerial
now.
battle that is dangerous in the game. Do we look to take that out?
Yeah.
There's some areas of the game that can be changed, like subs. Do we want to keep subs for only injuries? Because at the moment you
I would
get
say so.
8 fresh players coming against tired players that keeps the intensity and the collisions for the full game. So if the 15 who start the game have got to last the full 80 minutes, they're not going to be able to be as big as they currently are because they've got to last the full 80. The other one that I would like to look at is in the ruck. At the moment, they do that train, slow the ball down because there's a massive defensive line ready for you, and they box kick. As soon as the ball is seen in a ruck, they've got to get it out of that like a hot potato, because then a defensive team would have gaps in it, which would make the game more flowing and hopefully more tries that we all want to see.
Yeah,
so we are thinking of things to make the game
I'd like to see
more
rucking.
enjoyable.
We played the game where rucking was part and parcel of the game. That's been taken away in this jackaled scenario. And
Well, did you like rucking?
I didn't like being rucked, but you wouldn't.
Would you bring rucking back?
Yeah,
because at the moment, what's happening? You got somebody over the ball.
So you're not trying to ruin the whole game, then?
You got somebody jackling over the ball, and somebody from 10 meters away can literally launch them, hit them below the chest, and they're stationary. Those collisions over and over again are insane. And to do that right on a game, they've got to practice it 100 times during the week.
We talked about
it's the training as well, like you said.
We talked about a mutual friend earlier, Darren Ryan. Darren accidentally, so there's a game in Cardiff, a guy called Snid, who was both a mutual friend of mine and Darren's. Darren went to hit the ruck, but run from 20, 30 metres. As he did, the scrum half's head popped out of the ruck. He's made contact with the head accidentally. He's passed away 3 weeks later.
What?
So you might not have known that, but there was best mates with Darren, and he felt absolutely terrible about it. He's clear of anyone doing it here.
Right? Yeah, of course.
Dale McIntosh, who was coach upon it, said, if I was going to coach my players how to wipe a ruck, that's exactly how I do it. But in the days before that, you had boots on you if you were slowed down or anything like that.
Yeah.
So I'd rather have some scars or scabs on my back where I'd be booted than someone run from 30 meters at me and.
When I mentioned about maybe watering down the game, it's because you look at football. It's a ladies' game now. That's what they say now. Like, because it has gone so. soft, you would say. And I think now with under 18s, they've stopped heading.
Yeah.
But like again, maybe like you said, and this is something that I think when that 18-year-old goes into men's, he's not used to contesting in the air. He's not used to heading, and is there going to be a balance if you're doing that?
Again, with football, that needs to be phased in, the heading part of the game. But practicing those headers thousands of times during the week is causing the damage. Yeah. So 10 of the 11 1966 England team died of dementia.
Yeah.
From practicing heading during that. Yeah, but there's no difference.
Heavy wet leather ball.
But people are saying it's because of the heavy ball when it was wet. The balls now are lighter, but because they're lighter, they travel faster, so the impacts are harder.
Oh, yeah, they hurt.
Yeah, so it's all again, as Head for Change, we're football as well. We don't want heading taken out of the game, but we want it reduced up the number of times they practice it and the age that they start heading older.
We ultimately, I think we're both on the same page. We want to see this game flourish, and and parents not afraid to send their children to it. But it's a different game now, than it was when we were playing.
But don't you miss watching the game you played?
Yeah, when you look on YouTube, they seem to be much faster.
I think you was. Yeah, I love it.
But I watch rugby now through different eyes.
Yeah,
so I'm watching every contact, thinking.
Are you a 20 mile per hour man?
What's a 20 mile?
Vote for 20 miles per hour driver.
No.
I'm just checking.
No. But I do watch it through different eyes with what I know now. I love the big hits, but all I think to myself is, how many times has that been practiced in the week to get ready for that?
Because we had that conversation before we went in. Obviously, you as a winger, but that was your game, weren't it? That was your expertise,
and that's what I was told from a young age, from the age of 4. If you go into a tackle, at 99% you could get injured. So I was just 100 mile an hour all the time in training on the game day, and that was the way I played. That's why I had to finish through snap shoulders and for the 8th time popping my shoulder. So to think how many times I practiced that during the week,
you'll be familiar.
Was nuts.
You may not be, but you'll be familiar with a guy, unfortunately, a good mate of mine, Kai Traherne, who took his life and his family back in 2014. Did an article in the Daily Mail, and they're adamant that he had CTE. He was 100%er, so every training, a nightmare if he was certainly as a back, but as a player, because he hit every single ruck and every single tackle and every single maul 100%, whether it was a Monday morning or whether it was a Thursday afternoon or it was in a game. He was 100% all of the time, and because that's the way that things were taught back then. If you didn't go, you'll get hurt if you don't go for flat out, and invariably that might have happened, but that's what the mentality was, and I encourage. But then if you times that by the amount of the duration of the sessions, so I certainly when in my earlier professional days, you could be out there for 2.5 hours, flat out into each other. Then obviously after about an hour, you'll start to physically tired, and then you would see these injuries. Then so reduction in training time would be another thing I would.
Obviously with rugby now, I think they've gone lower again now for the high tackle, haven't they?
They've gone to semi-professional game. They've gone to the sternum level, but there's a big.
Because obviously that there is maybe a change they're trying to make.
Look, you were never able to hit people in the head legally. Okay? Ever. Right? So and we're talking about, there used to be, if you hit there and it rose up, they would let it go, same as in rugby league. There's lots of videos on YouTube and stuff like that. So the original contact was there, it rose up, it was deemed as accidental. We're talking a difference if they go to sternum level of there to there. Okay? It's not a huge difference, but people by and large who haven't played the game are making it a big difference. And the argument being that where they've tried to, I would have probably rolled out the professional game first and then dropped it down, whereas they've done it in the amateur game, and they're arguing that a 35-year-old tight end prop isn't going to lower his tackle height or carrying height into the game. So I think they could have done a bit more planning when they rolled that out in England, but they seem to be rolling that across the rest of the world now. So there is a slow reaction to probably the work that we're doing in looking at there's an issue. But there was talk about going down to waist height. Now, on a personal level, I think waist height is too low. But chest height is fine.
Do you worry about your health? Do you worry, where you're going to be in a few years' time after you're looking at these other players or friends of yours who have gone through it?
I try not to think about it. Like I said, I've been away for that experimental treatment. I'm trying to be positive, do everything with regards to, I've always, since finishing, kept fit, Mediterranean diet. I haven't drunk alcohol for 5 years. So trying to do everything that I can, not overload my diary, my day of what I do, and put that extra stress and pressure on myself. But don't allow it to creep in. It does sometimes.
When it does, it's daunting. But I'm the same as you. I try and shut it out, so to speak. Because the thing is, there's a bus out there, and I could walk out here and get hit by that bus, and dementia, the advanced stage, would never be a problem. And I'm very much for the here and now. I'll worry about things when they come. But on the days you have down days, because sometimes you're up and down, on the down days, and I think about it, I think, geez, my kids might have kids, and I'm not going to know who they are and stuff like that.
It's a scary thought.
We're talking 10, 15 years time, which is what the potential estimates is. It's maybe sooner. So that's the...
For the full dementia to kick in.
Yeah. Well, what did they say? Mine was 8 to 10 years. So the general cycle is between being diagnosed and then... But it's a slow process.
Can you imagine you could watch this back in 10 years' time and say, who's that man on the screen?
Yeah, exactly that. And that would be the concern.
That's bizarre.
I'm slightly different, right? So my old memory is pretty spot on, so I can remember games to school and stuff like that.
I can remember from a kid, I remember holidays and mini rugby, but it's from about 17, 18, that time until I finished is not really there.
So from 2010 until 2017 when I finished playing, I can't remember any games really. Whereas when I look at my professional career, my school career, so I can remember all those, so it's slightly different for me. So that's scary, and it's embarrassing in a certain sense as well, because I involved in face-to-face sales, so I have to manage that the same as you're managing things by you put practices into place to make sure that I don't forget their name. Or I've been out in places and people have come, oh, who's your mate, or who's this you're speaking to, and they've introduced themselves to me 5 minutes ago and I haven't got a clue. And then it's the embarrassment. Then I say, I introduce yourselves. Then I'm just going to go to the toilet, so I don't have to get put on the spot, so to speak. But
I got with Mel. She knows now. She will always come and introduce herself first. But when we walk up to somebody, because of names,
if she says the names, then you can catch on it. Like
yeah. Or she's
really supportive then.
Yeah, she's part of Head for Change. She's a trustee. She's working with a lot of the partners, so she speaks with a lot of the wives on a weekly basis. And
that's good.
An open place that they can talk in private about different things that are going on, and
that's really good.
Let's explore that a little bit further. Say she wasn't like that, okay? Because I've got my partners, stuck with me, and hopefully will stick with me for the foreseeable future. But she's 35, 36, one of the two.
Well then.
Forget, yeah. So
it's a 10 from Len.
But it's a 10 from Len, but it's probably a 2 from her, because and where we've changed now, and this is where it's affected me personally, is she's got lots of future plans. Let's go and buy properties, invest for her future, her kids' future, etc. I've got no future to a certain extent.
Don't think like that.
Don't
think like that.
So I'm here for the here and now. So any money that I earn, I want to spend now and enjoy it now. And so we've got a memories map. So we've basically got a map of the world, and we scratch off a bit when we've been there to create memories. And that was her. She created that to make sure that I remembered it. But ultimately, we talked about one of the players earlier whose wife didn't know before they went public with their names the other day. They've got to make a decision of whether they didn't sign up for that, did they? To be with a partner who's in dementia care, potentially in the next 10, 15 years, when they're only, we're talking about, I could be in a care home when my partner's 50. No, sorry, less than that, in her 40s.
It's very hard to not think that way, especially when it's been medically diagnosed, let's say. But you have to stay positive. You have to think positive.
Yeah. I try to use my time doing things like this, and to make things to create awareness. But so with the viewpoint of making it safer, so people realise, because there's a lot of misconceptions in the public about our motivations for doing things, and that hurts a bit, because when you're trying to give something back, and it's that I struggle with that sometimes, and then you get the personal attacks as well. But then on the flip side, as I said earlier, we've got families.
You seem like you you two seem like you get on great. I don't know what you was like before before the.
I can't remember.
I can tell you a story about Egypt.
Don't get him in trouble.
But
then he'll deny he don't remember, like you said.
We're sort of united by it, but unfortunately, an unfortunate diagnosis. But obviously, rugby's got a great way of weeding out.
You bang heads, you bang heads, isn't it?
Right. So after the game, when people, you get on. So most rugby people are decent people.
Yeah.
Right. So once you get very, and I've seen this in the business world. Once they know you play rugby or recognise you from rugby, they trust you a lot more than if you didn't. It's a great sport.
It transcends throughout the world.
It's a team sport, so you have to. They weed out arseholes at a very young age.
It is. Yeah, you're right.
So. But yeah, so by and large, most people, 99% of people you've played with or against, whether you didn't like them on the field or not, you see them now and you'll say, how's it going, stuff like that. So it's a great community.
Mutual bond, I think.
I just want to finish off really just with some positive maybe outcomes. And this is probably for our next generation, for the younger people. Obviously, we would like to make change now, but for our kids who, you said something that, and I agree with you, this talk here, who the fuck would want to be a rugby player?
Yeah.
Like real talk. If a kid, kids are soft now anyway. But if they watch this, and I know you probably not, you're not trying to do that on purpose. You're not trying to scare people. You want that to flourish, like you said. But what do we do to raise that awareness and make it better and safer for the next generation?
I think Alex has hit the nail on the head. Already. It's what you do in the week. It's how you manage. If you think there's been, is how you manage that incidents. Because there's big changes made from sort of 2012, where it's become much more the problem over HIAs and stuff like that at the international level. But that's at the international level. We've got lots of levels below that, and certainly with children taking up the sport, we need to make it safer for the game as a whole, not just the top level.
And the way you're going to do that is through education. So Ben Robinson was a 14-year-old boy who died with double impact syndrome. His parents, Karen and Peter, have been campaigning, if in doubt, sit them out. So if there is a suspected concussion, pull them off.
Yeah.
There's no point going back on if they've had that traumatic brain injury. And that's not just for rugby. They can't go into school then and play football or gymnastics. Give that brain the recovery it needs before they return to anything. And that's all we want. Understand the issue that could happen.
And sorry, just maybe I don't know this, but if you give the brain the right recovery, can that heal, or would that scar tissue always be there?
What my understanding is from an impact, from being concussed, it bruises. And if you go back too early, it can be bruised again.
A bruise and a bruise and a bruise, yeah.
We need to give it the rest in between. Recovering 100%, I don't think it can.
I want to kind of finish it really with you guys with maybe just a bit of your final say, really. If there's anything else that you would like to get out of this, maybe.
I'd like to I spoke to one of my mates who's a coach yesterday, and he said that basically he would, if there's any doubt now, which he will pull a player off if he thinks there's any concussed. But from a coach's perspective, you are under a certain amount of pressures. A, if you're paid to be a coach, then you've got that. B, if it's your local team, you want them to do as well as they can. But ultimately, you want coaches to have the strength not to be, because if you don't perform and you're coaching is a performance game, they haven't got the threat of losing their jobs, so to speak, because they've taken potentially one or two of their best players off when they've been injured, and rightly so. But they might have been influenced by the external pressures not to do that and act in the player's best interest. So I'd like coaches to recognise, so become aware and recognise and remove if necessary, and that's across every single level. So,
anything to maybe the people out there, maybe you have kind of scrutinised you or said anything funny?
They're speaking from a point of view where they don't know the information that we know. I would prefer it if, when they do know the information, obviously when this progresses and that information will be out there, for them to make their comments then. I get that some people don't agree with what's happening, and that's fine. And there's players who clearly have got symptoms and probably suffering who don't want to claim, and that's fine. I've got no problem with that at all. But the judgments are made for people, certainly publicly online and stuff like that. Then if you look at the comments on certain news articles, they talk about they did this sort of lifestyle, or they had a fight in town or something. Now they know that's not the case. Educate yourselves first before commenting. And find out what the condition is, how it's caused, and what the probability of how it's been caused with us guys has been.
Yeah,
And
because you was known as a bit of a scrapper then, was you, Len? And, you know, you think
I was
a few
speaking
people are
generally,
talking.
but the people I've seen, not just talking about me, but when people say,
Are these jealous people,
choices,
would you say?
to a certain extent, yes. But there seems to be a lot of bitter people. So there's a lot of keyboard warriors out there, as I'm sure you're aware, who have their opinions, and everyone's entitled to their opinions. You know, a bit like arseholes, everyone's got one. Whether those opinions are right or not, there's a lot of assumptions made by people about certain people's motivations and stuff like that. We've been public with it from the beginning on the basis that we want to make a change and make it better for the future generations and make that game still be there first and foremost, but be as safe as possible. It's never going to be risk-free. It's a contact sport. We love the physical element of the contact sport. Both of us were physical rugby players and relish that physical contact. And, you know, however, training, what happens when there potentially is an issue in a game, and the management of that issue post-game is where we can make those major strides forward. So that's my personal view.
You said it all. But the big
Come
one,
on, you've got to give it yours.
the big one for me. Let's get this education right. We're with Head for Change. We're rolling out an education program for grassroots kids, mums and dads, coaches to understand the issues for this game to flourish in the future. If we get it right there, the future generations will be in a lot better position, because we weren't educated. As I said at the beginning, my mum had a breakdown when I got diagnosed. Why did I send you to rugby? And I said, look, mum, you didn't know. But we've got a chance now to make the future generations, their mums and dads, more educated on this issue. So we're in a lot safer position.
That's really positive. Guys, I wish you all the best with it. Yeah, I think my perception on it has changed a lot. I get it anyway, and of course, it's better to be safe than sorry. But yeah, my perception has definitely changed on it. And that was what I wanted to ask you just quickly. Do you think that this, rugby in the future will be, something where they say, right, you've got to sign your life away here, this is the only way you can play type of thing? Or
I'm not sure how that would stand up legally, but it's already in place at the moment. So there's certain unions not a million miles away that you have to sign a waiver. Is my understanding of it.
And the NFL have brought that into place since they settled their legal action over there 14 years ago.
So these people will go into it now and they'll know the danger, so they can in years' time say, look, you can't be a fucking Clayton.
Let me finish with a couple of comments that people generally say on this. So I do it all again, or you probably do it all, I do it all again, or you do it all again. Don't say you wouldn't, okay? They're not speaking from a perspective of the diagnosis we have, okay? And it's difficult unless you've had that diagnosis yourself to give an accurate viewpoint on that. The viewpoint that how do they know it's not caused by a fight they had in town, or drinking alcohol too much? Alcohol causes dementia. This is a specific type of diagnosis with CTE, with certain parts of the brain, and that brain is consistent with the damage with across the board with all us rugby players, but again with American football and those tested before, the damage is in the same areas, so that there's a difference there. That we were, as professionals, that we on or ex-professionals, that we were paid handsomely for that job. The reality is we weren't. Certainly in the late 90s, early 2000s, professional rugby players weren't paid heavily. So, and there's that misconception as well. So there's a lot of bitterness towards it, but similarly there's a lot of supporters as well. So public support. So I'm grateful for that support. So thank you for everyone who supported what we're trying to do.
Do you think anyone should? Do you think it's okay for people to come out, anonymously, or do you think people should be coming out proudly?
Depends on their viewpoint. I've got specific views on this. I'm sure Alex will follow me on this. If your motivation is you're trying to make the game better and safer, then unless you've got family members who don't know, or there's jobs on the line, if you work for the Welsh Rugby,
you work on a train track or something.
Yeah, then you need to. Then being anonymous doesn't help that, because by putting our names on it, by doing things like this, we're creating awareness, and that's giving it the whole drive for change momentum. So I would, on a personal level, that's why I didn't go anonymous, and that's why I've been quite actively trying to make everything safer.
For me, it's everybody's in a different boat, and you've got to respect that. I know some players who are part of the claim in rugby positions. Let's put it like that. And yeah, couldn't have their name out there at the moment, but there were some big names announced last Friday. 3 World Cup winners, 4 have been tested, 3 have been diagnosed.
55 internationals.
Again, each to their own, and we can only control what we do, and that's to make a positive change.
Well, it seems like you're in the right place, guys, and I really want to thank you for coming today and opening up about this important topic, you know. And yeah, guys, I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Leave us your comments in the comment box if you want to support these guys. Head for change. What is it?
Lenny will read
I've got no problem responding to any comments because
don't feed into the hate.
But that's the problem. I try and give a calm, reasoned response to it. And then what tends to happen, this is particularly frustrating. You get this.
He reads them, he forgets about them.
So the problem might, so I'll respond. So I quite like a debate and things. So I think I'm helping people understand. But what tends to happen is they write a comment, blah, 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 and I'll prove that wrong. And then there'll be a big old argument where other people could learn from it, and they delete the original comment, and it absolutely kills me because I spent about a whole weekend quoting screenshot
what they put on.
So,
Lenny, honestly, thank you, Al.
Cheers, buddy.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. I really enjoyed that, guys.
Thank you. I'm going for a Thai curry now.
Not bad, if
the market.
Happy. Oh, it's lovely, isn't it?
Beautiful.
Hope
I was excited to come down.
Oh, that was the only reason. I hope you enjoyed this, guys. Stay central.
The Central Club.